Definitely, it doesn't feel like, my work at most days, it's still like that. But every time we have so technically I'm a research assistant, but over the past 9 to 10 months I've been in survey program. So anytime there's like surveys, 20-station call center, phone surveys, and kind of mail and web and stuff like that. So I do I do the initial program surveys and maintain some of the issues.
Overprepared is better than underprepared. So we were talking about I don't know exactly.
So we're not actually majorly in research. We're mainly focused on contracts. Most of our stuff is evaluation and quality for stadiums. So we have a project, a couple of recurring projects with what used to be debt.
I'm going to pass these out and just fill them out as you can. I just need them back at the end of today.
A recurring study of alcohol and substance abuse for Texas students, and things like that. So some people, like we sometimes have friends who are working on research, but most of the time it's us doing an evaluation and then just giving that.
Circling the things, yeah, and I'll talk about it in just a minute. Just wanted to pass it out while I had a chance. Deidre, are you moving up here? Deirdre or Deidre? Deidre, okay. So just fill these out when you get a chance. I'll talk about it here in a minute. And this Sarah, I'm going to send you the stuff. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, one more? Excuse me. There, right here?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so what I just passed out is we give this to our staff and we like to give it to volunteers. It's kind of a little personality profile. It's two-sided. Circle the words that describe you, that you feel like describe you, and then at the bottom you'll add them up. And whichever has the highest number, that's your style. And we'll go over this a little bit later and I'll give you the style descriptions. Sound good? And what we do is we give it to the staff and we can kind of see who's like who. All right. I'm going to grab a pen out of here. All right, did everybody find a bathroom either down here or upstairs? Okay, remember, just go when you can. 35 people and 2 bathrooms is a little difficult.
So you go ahead and circle whatever you think fits into your information category and then add them up at the end. And so it has the total of your
And this, I don't see that I keep losing my little clicker. I know, I just had it. It's not in my pocket.
Yes.
Aha! I keep hiding it back here. All right, we got a couple more upstairs. So we'll wait just a second, and I'm going to go apparently I hid the descriptions from myself. So I'll get those during the break at lunch. Oh, people are upstairs. You can see when we had apartments up there, they'd play their music. It's like one guy was dancing up there, wasn't he? He was so loud. Anyway, so if the thing starts to shake, that's why. Yeah, you can take the whole box if you want. I got it in my box. Yeah. Okay. All right, so I think I am going to sit for a lot of this. I know you can't imagine why. And I usually walk around a lot, so this is going to be weird. But what we're going to do now is talk about the CASA role. This is where we lock the doors and don't let you out. Because it's going to... Now, I wanted to reassure you that you will not be listening to me the entire training. You do get me most of the day today. But we try to mix it up and have a lot of guest speakers and that kind of thing. So today is kind of the longest, hardest day, if you ask me. And so just hang in there. And again, snacks, everything in the conference room, and get up when you need to. All right? So this is our mission statement: to improve the lives of children in foster care through powerful volunteer advocacy, ensuring that each is placed in a safe and permanent home. That's our mission. That's what we're here about. And so you can see the words powerful volunteer advocacy. I mentioned this during a lot of orientation, but all of our advocacy at this CASA program is volunteer. Now, a lot of CASA programs, there's 71 CASA programs in Texas, operate with staff also advocating for children, what we call working the case. And so we really don't believe in that. We've never done it since 2001. The reason other CASA programs do it is because they want to be able to say we serve 100% of children in foster care. You get more money from Texas CASA when you say that, but they're changing the rules around. Now you get more money if you are serving kids with volunteers, which, if you ask me, is the spirit of the program. Right? Why is volunteer advocacy better? Because you're not being paid to be there. You have no other interest, vested interest, than the best interest of the child. We can say, oh, we're not part of the child welfare system, but we are. We do this every day. We can tend to get jaded and even more frustrated than our volunteers. And so I don't think staff make as an effective advocate. Now, if someone has to step off their case, or we get right now, we are out of volunteers, flat out. And we got 6 cases 2 weeks ago. How many last week? 4? 2. 2 and 2 this week. So what that means is we are recycling volunteers. We are calling people that haven't had a case in 2 years, 3 years. We've got some that are on vacation that we've got the date they're coming back. And so we are really, really in need of volunteers. So this couldn't be a better time to have 35 people in training. Okay. What did I do with mine? I may have left my... No, here it is. So let's talk about problems in foster care. First off, it's not home, right? It's not permanent. Most children, because of the shortage of foster homes, will move out of the area. So travel is part of being a CASA volunteer. There is such a shortage that there is a thing called the Child Placement Unit, the CPU. We do love our acronyms. If I start talking in acronyms and you don't get it, you don't have to raise your hand. Say, hey, wait a second, I don't know what you're talking about. Later today, I'll be passing out acronyms that CPS uses and acronyms that CASA uses. A lot of them are the same, but some aren't. Because you'll be reading legal documents from CPS, and they may have language that you don't understand. All right, so that child placement unit, they call up, and the investigator or the caseworker calls up and says, hey, I've got a 12-year-old girl. She needs a placement. They will literally call around the state, look and see what's open, and send her where it's appropriate. Most children are not only traumatized in their home, Then we take them from their home, their friends, their parents, their dog, their school, their teachers, everything, and move them to a whole new community. They have to start school the next day. They have to see a doctor and a dentist, minimally, within 3 days of being there. And, you know, it's just a lot of change. And then we're very likely to have them move 1 or 2 times within a 12-month period. So, do you think you can bond and attach with caregivers if you're moving every 3 months or 2 months? No. And most of our kids, about 95% are very bonded to their parents. And so we've removed them from the people they love. 99.9%, I won't say that, 98% of kids want to go home. They just do. It's what they're familiar with. It's what they know. They're not happy to be placed out of their home. And so we have to, while the best interest does speak to what the child wants, we have to look at what's best for the child. And that's why this really isn't a mentor program, or you may get close to your CASA child, but they may want to go home and you're saying, I'm sorry, that's not going to happen, for these reasons. It's not safe and appropriate, and that's what this means. And so, it's a problem. But our job is best interest, and we'll talk more about that in a little while. If kids want to go home and we're recommending that they go with Aunt Sally, we may not be the most popular people. Okay? There is re-abuse within the system, but that's the stuff that makes the papers. It's rare. It doesn't happen that often. Daycare settings, foster homes. The majority of foster parents are really fabulous people who want to take care of kids. They're spending a lot of money out of their own pocket. It doesn't pay well to be a foster parent. Really, the only way you can make money at it is if you're not taking care of kids and you got a bunch of them in your home. And they're getting rid of what they call group homes. And so you won't, I think 6 is the maximum. And even that's going to get lowered. So, can you imagine 6 kids, you're getting paid about, what would you say, $35 a day per kid? Plus they have Medicaid. So it's really hard to make money at it. I don't know if anybody can take care of their kids for $35 a day. Okay. Kids have really, they don't bond to their caregivers, and if you're moving really often, you're not really learning those appropriate coping skills, right? My mom, taught me things like, this is going to date me, how to open a checking account, how to balance my checkbook, how to look somebody in the eye and shake their hand, what to do when school got overwhelming, those kinds of things, all the things that most parents teach their children. And I think one of the biggest problems with foster care is it's the child that's always moved, okay? So they didn't do anything wrong, but they're always the one that has to move. And that causes a lot of frustration and anger in children. And so while Deidre spoke to it, a lot of these kids have been in foster care a while. They know the system. They know how to push the buttons and break the rules, so they get moved. But a lot of that anger and frustration comes from the fact they've been removed from their home. Research shows that, and Deidre spoke to this as well, that children in foster care are on psychotropic medications at a much higher rate than any other child. We had a situation, a child was about 6 and was on a high number of medications. It was 10 to 12, I think, medications. I don't even know how you can give a kid a mental health diagnosis at the age of 6. CASA can call for what's called a medical review. All right? This CASA volunteer researched the medications, called for a medical review, and by the time she got done with the doctor and everybody else, that child was on 2 medications which were appropriate for him. What happens is he gets on one medication, gets side effects, and they put him on another medication for the side effects, which causes this, which causes that. They see a new doctor every time they move. They may get on new medication for that. So it's just a big circle. And so CASA can do a lot to reduce the number of medications that a child is on. Medical advocacy is huge. I've had a few, some of the college students that we've worked with, who are CASA volunteers are really want to go to medical school. And one of the ways we advocate is in the medical system. And so that's always a big plus for them and a huge plus for the kids. Okay, we talked about that. Now we're going to look at definitions of abuse. Now one of the things, that I'm going to be really clear, I'm going to let y'all pass these and pass them back to other tables. We should have enough for everybody. We do not investigate child abuse. Okay, we leave that to CPS. So, oh, I do need one if y'all give me one. Thank you. Okay. So, as I said, re-abuse in the system is rare, but it does happen. CASA keeps their eyes on things. And so we had a situation, again, we don't investigate abuse, but we need to be able to recognize the signs and symptoms. Okay? Do we have enough for everybody? Okay, thanks. All right, thank you, Tricia. So we're going to look at the signs and symptoms of child abuse and neglect, look at the definitions, but we're always going to leave the investigation up to CPS. So we had a situation where, CASA sees the child once a month. The volunteer sees the child at least once a month. So this volunteer, was Barbara visiting her kid more often than that? That's what okay, so she was seeing this baby. He was what, 18 months?
Yes.
18 months old. He got placed with a relative, which we always want. We really want that. They have to be vetted. They have to meet certain criteria. So we placed with the relative. Well, she noticed that this 18-month-old was going backwards instead of forwards in development. So every time she went, she made some unannounced visits, and she discovered that they were leaving the baby in the crib all day long. So nobody was interacting with the baby. But if there had not been a CASA, nobody would have known that was going on. She made the call, talked to her supervisor, and we'll talk about that process. Called her supervisor, called CPS, made the report, CPS investigated, and that child was moved. So that's powerful volunteer advocacy, right? Okay. If we had not had eyes on the child, child protection caseworkers are required to see their children once a month. You're going to have one case. That's the beauty of CASA, one case at a time. You're going to have the time and attention to take care of that one child or set of siblings. So CPS has upwards of 30 cases. Okay, so a case can be one child, can be 4, 6. We've had a case of 8 children. Don't worry, we put 2 CASAs on that. And so we have the luxury of the time and attention for that one case. You can't tell me people at CPS don't want to do that. They go to work at CPS because they love kids and they want to help. Nobody goes for the great pay and the fabulous hours, right? And so we are able to do things that they can't do because they're bound by rules and policy. Sometimes you hear these stories of, well, I called CPS and they didn't do anything. Well, things have to meet the legal definition of abuse or neglect. So you are a mandatory reporter, which means if you suspect it, report it. Everyone in Texas is a mandatory reporter, but now you really are, right? And so we want you to recognize those signs and symptoms. And again, if Barbara hadn't noticed that about that baby, it might have been several months before that happened. We have had caseworkers tell us, I cannot physically see all the children that are on my caseload, because remember I said they're placed everywhere. So they do a lot of driving, which is why you're going to want to email, text, or call them. They are all mobile now. They don't sit in the office at all. Okay? So what table were y'all? Were green over here, right? Oh, and feel free to eat your Nutri-Grain bar now. Green over here. Becky, will you read the description and indicators of physical abuse?
Yes. Description: intentionally harming a child, use of excessive force, reckless endangerment.
Okay.
The indicators are unexplained bruises, welts, and scars, injuries in various stages of healing, bite marks, unexplained burns, fractures, injuries not fitting explanation, and internal damage or head injury.
Okay, good. So that's what most of you think about when you think about child abuse, right? Certainly what I thought about. About 80% of the cases we see are neglect, severe neglect. So severe that children had to be removed. But we also see physical abuse, but it's not the majority of what we see. So I hope that gives you, if you're scared about can I handle it, neglect is hard to hear about and see, but broken bones, I think we had was he 4 months old, the new case that came in with broken ribs. You know, that's pretty hard to read and to learn about. So we'll talk more about what you can do to, we're going to talk about boundary settings and stress, and more people you can talk to and things you can do to take care of yourself. All right, sexual abuse. Let's go with this table over here. Anybody want to read it?
I'll read it.
Okay, thanks, Anthony.
So the description, engaging a child in any activity for an adult's own sexual gratification. The indicators are age-inappropriate sexual knowledge, sexual acting out, child disclosure of abuse, excessive masturbation, physical injury to genital area, pregnancy or STD at an age, torn, stained, or bloody underclothing, depression, distress, or trauma, and extreme fear.
Okay, thank you. Now this paper that we're looking at, this training manual that we used to give you this huge manual, but it was written in 2001. They're coming out with a new one that we'll be using in September. So trauma, all the kids have suffered trauma. So this is a little outdated. Whether they've been neglected or abused, there's trauma. So I want to point that out. I think an extreme fear, that can be a lot of different things. Age-inappropriate sexual knowledge, that is a big indicator that something is going on. It could be that it could be things like watching television, parents discussing things, no boundaries in the home, and so they just know things a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old shouldn't know, but it's a huge red flag. Of course, sexual acting out, that does happen. We do see that in small children, but we also see that in teenagers, which may or may not be about sexual abuse and may be about a mental health issue or a behavioral issue. Okay. Emotional abuse. Let's see. Vera, you want to read it?
Yeah. So description. The systemic dismantlement of a child. It is designed to reduce a child's self-concept to the point where the child feels unworthy of respect, unworthy of friendship, and unworthy of love and protection, the natural birthrights of all children. For indicators, habit disorders, so thumb sucking, biting, rocking.
Enuresis, which is bedwetting.
Conduct disorders, withdrawal or antisocial behavior, behavioral extremes, overly adaptive behavior, lags in emotional or intellectual development, low self-esteem, depression, or suicide attempts.
Great. So that enuresis is just what, some people, you don't know, it's just a big word for bedwetting. Bedwetting in children, older children, is a sign, I think, is that something is happening. They're really under a lot of stress. It could be trauma related. We may see children who are moved go back to bedwetting from the stress and trauma of the move. So that's something to think about. Okay, then neglect. Nancy, you want to read that?
Sure. The neglect is failure of the person responsible for the child's welfare to provide necessary food, care, clothing, shelter, or medical attention. It can also be failure to act when such failure interferes with the child's health and safety. The physical signs are malnourishment, missed immunizations, lack of dental care, lack of supervision, consistent dirtiness, constant tiredness or listlessness. The material signs are insufficient or improper clothing, filthy living conditions, inadequate shelter, insufficient food or nutrition.
Okay, thanks. So again, this is the one we deal with the most. Sometimes you'll see pictures in the legal documents that come from CPS, which are alarming. We don't have time for a lot of case studies right now, but we have a case study that I I don't know why, but I was shocked at how these people were living. No furniture in the house, dirty diapers, dog feces, cat feces in the carpet, methamphetamine, made, and then not only were they making methamphetamine in the house, they were storing it, you know, this far off the ground. They had a toddler, and there were 4 kids involved. They weren't going to school, they hadn't been to the doctor. So when I saw the pictures, I was like, wow, that really surprises me. I knew neglect happened, but I didn't understand what severe neglect was really all about until I saw those pictures. And so, you know, kind of be ready to experience things that you haven't seen or experienced before necessarily. Okay. Questions about definitions of abuse? Yeah.
Oh, can you give an example of how a youngster would show age inappropriate sexual knowledge?
Yeah, so if I'm 3 and I know maybe street language for all the body parts, we had a situation where a boy was developing, it was a physical thing, developing very rapidly, standing on the table. I think this is standing on the table saying, look at my big boy, I'm going to say penis. Okay, he had not been sexually abused, but it was certainly inappropriate behavior.
Okay.
So, but it was an indicator.
And then there was a case of a 4-year-old that was reenacting sexual acts. So, what 4-year-old should know that?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
On emotional abuse, with regard to an indicator, overly adaptive behavior on emotional abuse, what would that?
Overly adaptive really means adapting to every situation. I want to make you happy, and so I'm going to do what you want. Okay, and then I'm going to do something different to make you happy. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Let's see what we got coming up next. All right. Let's talk about how a case enters the system. How many of you want to know more about CPS? And we will talk about this. When we talk about CPS, thank you. I'm going to pass these out over here. Make sure I gave you 6. I'm going to keep one. All right. And if y'all would just pass those out, make sure everybody gets one. Oh, and I was going to tell you, while y'all are looking at those, I was going to tell you about these pictures on the wall. These are all kids who are waiting for adoption. Do we have enough for everybody? Everybody got their hands? Anyway, some of these kids have aged out of the system. These are pretty old. It's part of a project called Heart Gallery, where we have professional photographers take pictures of the kids so we kind of capture who they are rather than a little Polaroid. Just aged myself again. Rather than a little snap with their phone that the caseworker took. And so the 2 kids on the end, Bria and Chase, were our CASA kids. Both have aged out of foster care. This little boy with the football actually went back with his family. Caseworker told me that. So these are all kids that were or are waiting for adoption. So a Heart Gallery is a traveling exhibit around the state. There's Evie. Hi, Evie.
Quit screaming in the back, sorry.
Okay, this is Joyce Carter. She's one of our advocate supervisors.
Sorry,
That's okay. She'll be doing some training for us later. And if we're lucky, we'll get to play with the baby. She is 2 months?
2 months. Yes, ma'am.
2 months, and Evie is 2.
2.5.
2.5. She was with us, Evie was with us when how old was she? 4 months old?
Yep.
When Joyce came to work here. And so moms and dads can bring their babies until they're a year old. So we, at one point, how many babies?
We had 5.
In the office. It was interesting, wasn't it?
It was. We had a baby room. We converted an office for a baby room.
Yep.
Pack and plays in there.
Yeah. All right. So if you're looking at this handout, I'm going to go over it. So it says start here. Okay. You'll see that a call is made to the child abuse hotline, and it gives you the number there. We have that number handy, but you always want to have, you'll have it now. So a call is made. Now we talked about reporting. I really want to emphasize, if you suspect it, report it. Why is that? Because you may have that last piece of the puzzle. Maybe 5 people have called and they didn't have enough information to go and start an investigation, and you may have that last piece of the puzzle that may put it all together. So if you suspect it, report it. And just know that you may have it. So the call is made to the hotline. Child Protective Services investigates. You go up one more, it says no abuse or neglect, the case is closed. Okay, that's when they go in and they say, well, this doesn't meet the legal definition, or it was, when my husband was a CPS worker, there was just a rash of people who were getting divorced, calling on each other, saying, oh, so-and-so sexually abused my child. So if they investigate that, they discover it's nothing, a case will be closed. Or it may not meet the legal definition. When CPS investigates, you go to the right, it says CPS finds an issue and a case is opened. It can go one of 2 ways. It's going to go to Family-Based Safety Services, which we lovingly call FBSS. Don't worry, there will be no quiz on acronyms. If it goes to Family-Based Safety Services, the first thing that happens is the family is assigned a caseworker and a service plan. Parents who are involved with CPS get what's called a service plan. We talked a little bit about it in orientation. It's a list of things that parents are required to do to get in Family-Based Safety Services to close the case. In foster care, it means to get your kids back. Failure to comply with a service plan means that if you're in Family-Based Safety Services, if your home becomes unsafe or you fail to comply with the service plan, children may be removed. When children have been removed, failure to comply with the service plan is grounds for termination of parental rights. It's usually not the only thing, but it's a big part of it. So if you're in Family-Based Safety Services, you get the caseworker and the service plan. We give you resources, or CPS gives that family resources to meet their needs. Could be teaching them about public transportation, the food bank, helping them build a support system locally so they can get what they need. The caseworker visits to assess the needs and assure the safety of the child. And then finally, the case is closed. If they are unsuccessful, then the child is removed from the parents. Okay, so we go down, and you can see that if children are removed based on a failure for the case to work out in Family-Based Safety Services, they go into foster care. If you're coming from the left, it shows CPS finds an issue, the case is opened, they may go straight into foster care. It may be that the home was so unsafe that children had to be removed immediately. Okay? Once children are removed, then we go down. We can see there may be what they call a kinship placement, which means your relatives, or what we call fictive kin, which is like your godmother or your best friend who's known your kids since you were 5, neighbors, teachers, those kinds of things. And that's why they use the word kinship. That's always our preference, CPS's preference and CASA's preference, keeping kids with somebody they know. Okay? If there's no kinship placement available, then they're placed in a licensed foster home. Once everybody is got their service plan and the child is in a home, if the parents do what we call work in their services, if they meet everything in their service plan, if they're coming to court, they're addressing whatever issue brought that child, or issues that brought that child into foster care, then the child can be reunited with the parents, can be adopted by a guardian like a kinship, can be adopted by a non-relative, or what we really want to avoid, the child can age out. Okay? Any questions about that? It's a big system.
What's the age out?
Age out means they live in foster care until they're 18.
18.
Okay?
Okay.
Becky?
So this says, they're reunited with their parents, and then it says case closed. But I assume that there's some kind of period, probationary
Oh, good
period.
question. Yes, there's a 6-month monitoring period, and CASA will stay on the case during that 6 months. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
What percentage of people, what is the percentage breakdown of what happens to the kids?
That's a great question. When CPS was here last time, the CPS supervisor, she indicated that about 2% of kids get reunited with their parents, so it's very low. But over 80% go with relatives or kinship. So it's not super likely that they're going to go home with mom and dad, but if you figure the court gives parents 365 days, that's not working days, that's 365 days from the day of removal, that starts day 1, to get their kids back. If you have a 10-year methamphetamine habit, how likely are you to get that under control in 12 months? And quite honestly, it's not really 12 months. If parents have not gotten with it in month 5 or 6, CPS starts looking for other options. So it's a pretty short period of time to get your act together. Yes, ma'am.
Now, is that 365 days total, or if they, for example, are assigned the service plan, does it start then?
No, the day of removal.
Okay.
And those laws, and we'll talk about that in a little while, those laws were put in place to keep children from lingering in foster care. Because what was happening, and actually if you like to read, there's a really good book called 3 Little Words, which is a great book written by a woman who was in foster care in Florida. One of the things before these laws changed, she was in foster care for many years, and it wasn't until she got a CASA volunteer that they terminated the mother's parental rights so that she could be adopted. So she was in foster care 5 or 6 years, and they were still giving her mom another chance and another chance and another chance. So now the law says 12 months with a one-time 6-month extension under extenuating circumstances. So one situation we had was mom and dad had a drug problem, drug and alcohol problem. They got sober, they're doing great, they're working their services, but dad has a relapse. And they're in month, 9, 10? But he let the caseworker know before he had a dirty drug test, hey, this happened, what can I do to make this right? Went to treatment, did everything he was supposed to do, so the judge granted a 6-month extension. So it does happen. But it has to be pretty extreme circumstances.
And parents can start any kind of service they feel they need before a service plan is made for them. They can take that initiative if they want. They don't have to wait.
Because you get the service plan about how many days later? About a month later?
They try to get that sooner, but a lot of times because of trying to get that meeting scheduled, it's hard to get it scheduled with all the parties. But
Yeah.
about a month.
About a month. Yeah.
I know I was reading something about possibly aging out the kids at 21. I don't know if that's...
Oh, yes, I'm so glad you said that. So children age out at 18, or they can choose to stay in foster care until they're 21. Most kids, they're done. They're not interested in having caseworkers or anybody else in their life. But really, from 18 to 21, it's just a paid placement. Do they still get their services, Trish? Their therapy, and if they want to?
If they want to.
So yeah, they can elect to stay in foster care until they're 21. So some kids leave at 18, figure out it's not as easy as they thought, and say, ooh, I'd like to come back. Well, so we say they can come back. They have to make that decision within 12 months, and they can only really come back if there's a placement. Do you want to talk about DeJuan?
Yeah, so I had a youth, well, he was actually a child when he was removed. His sister got adopted, well, they both got adopted, and I would say within a year of that adoption, the adoptive placement returned just him to CPS. They couldn't handle his behaviors, which in my opinion weren't that horrible. But they kept his sister, so there was an option for just him, but not his sister. So as you can see, he had extreme issues from that he just never recovered from. So the rest of his time in foster care were multiple failed placements because he knew what he had to do to change placements. He manipulated that, mostly because he was testing people to see how far he could go, how much did they really care about him, so they could keep him. Well, he ended up aging out of care. He did not want to stay in care. And we got him reconnected with his biological mom. He was removed from her when she was young. She there was medical neglect. So she didn't really know how to take care of a child because she didn't have that in her life either. And so we reconnected them, and she was real gung-ho. Yes, I want him. I'm going to do this. She had had another child since then, was able to keep him just fine. So they relocated from Brenham to Big Springs?
Dripping Springs.
No, Big Springs.
Big
It's way
Springs, way,
far away.
okay.
And so he moved with her. Well, then, after a few months, she just abandoned him. She moved somewhere else with her boyfriend, took his brother, half-brother, and left him there. So he was stranded out in Big Springs, and we were no longer on the case because he didn't want to stay in care. So there was nothing that legally we could do anyway. And the CASA volunteer tried to reconnect with him, but he was just so distraught that he didn't want to have anything to do with any of us anymore. And so he was there. I still kind of Facebook check in on him occasionally, and he just basically couch surfs with friends.
Because he wanted to come back into care. It hadn't been that 1 year, but they couldn't find a placement for him. Before they could find a placement, let me say that, he disappeared.
Yeah. Couldn't find a placement that would take him.
So we say you can come, CPS says you can come back after a year, but there has to be a place to put you. So, very unfortunate. It's beyond unfortunate. It's terrible. All right, questions about how a case enters the system? Well, I'm going to move this out of your way, Deirdre. Looks like it's crowding you. All right. Whoops. You know I want to be a TV star, video star. Okay.
I think I'm going to go.
Oh, thank you. Trish is going to go pick up lunch, so that'll be exciting. Not for her, for us. All right, so let's talk about how CASA is appointed. We can only be appointed by a judge. Okay. So, the judge appoints Voices for Children as the guardian ad litem. Okay. A lot of CASA programs are not guardian ad litem programs. They are in Dallas County, Dallas CASA. They are called Friend of the Court. So a guardian ad litem has duties and responsibilities under the Texas Family Code. So the judge appoints Voices for Children as the guardian ad litem. Then we give the case to a volunteer. Okay, so you're working with Voices for Children. You are actually sworn in by a judge. So this is a legal role. We are now appointed, let me make sure we're going to, yeah. We are now appointed at the first hearing called an ex parte hearing. Why is it called ex parte? Because not all the parties are present. So we're now appointed at that hearing. It used to be we weren't appointed until the second hearing. And I've got a timeline for you here in just a minute. So as we talked about in a lot of your interviews, we don't have a waiting list. We don't say, whoop, Marissa's up next, you know, and so we're going to give her this case. We work really hard to match you with a case. So at the second to last day of training, you'll fill out a case preference form. We'll try to, you can put on there, I travel regularly to Dallas. I want to work with young ones. I don't want to work with sexual abuse. You can put all that on your case preference form, and we're going to work really hard. We get to know you during training. We've interviewed you. We know who you are, and we're going to work really hard to match that case to you. Okay? We contact you, and we say, hey, we've got a case for you. Would you, it's 2 kids. They're placed in Brenham, and parental drug abuse. And at that point, you can say, sure, I'd like to learn more. Or you can say, no, it's a bad time in my life, or that doesn't sound like something I want to do. Oh, they're toddlers. I don't want to work with toddlers. I have some people that prefer to work with young ones because there's no school. You don't have to work with the school. So, you know, I have one volunteer in particular. She does not have a lot of flexibility at her job. And so she likes to work with the young ones so she doesn't have to go to the school or deal with that. So if you say, yes, I'd like to learn more, we are doing everything on Google. So we're going to share those legal documents with you. On Monday, I think, we are going to give you all a Google email address, and it's going to be your name, CASA, so we Kate Mason CASA at vfcbrazos.org. That way, we all are uniform. Everybody will know who you are when you send an email, and if your email is like sexygirl45@hotmail, you don't have to use it. You've seen those emails, haven't you? It's like,
How'd you guess?
how'd you guess? Yeah. Anyway, so we send you the legal documents. Remember when you're reading the affidavit, and we'll look at an affidavit today, that that's the legal case against the parents. So when you read it, when I read them, I'll think, oh, those terrible parents, you know. Or I'll think, wow, drug addiction does bad things to people. You know, 80% of our families are dealing with a drug abuse issue or a mental health issue or both. And so they just can't take care of their kids. And so I think when you meet with the parents, I think CASA volunteers are always surprised how much they want the parents to get it together, because kids want to go home. So we send you those legal documents, and you read those, and then at that point you can decide you want the case. Okay? Ball's always in your court. We don't say, hey, this is the case for you, go after it, good luck. You know, if you accept the case, then you meet with your advocate supervisor, and she will go over a tentative plan for you for the next month. So we don't let you just hit the ground running with no plan. Your supervisor, we're going to talk more about supervisors in a little while, should be there for you to guide you, to direct you, to pave the way for your advocacy. I think they're all really good at their jobs, and so you're going to meet with them at least once a month, face to face. Okay, questions? We now, this is new in the last year, have a program called Early Family Engagement, or EFE. So it used to be, by law, from the ex parte hearing to what's called the adversary hearing, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's like a mini trial where parents say yes, they may not contest the removal. They may say, sure, you can have my kids, I've got a drug problem, I need to go get treatment. Or they may say, heck no, you can't have my kids. I didn't do anything wrong and I want them back. It used to be there was a 2-week period between when the removal happened and when CASA was appointed. Sometimes those parents didn't even know where their children were for 2 weeks. So can you imagine how angry and upset you would be by the 14th day? You don't know where your kids are, you don't know what's going on, nobody's contacted you, nobody's talking to you. So our executive director piloted this program in Travis County. It's excellent. It's called Early Family Engagement. It's a seasoned volunteer, so who gets on the case day one, goes and meets with the parents, meets with the kids, finds out what they need, and actually writes a court report for that adversary hearing. So parents are a lot less defensive. It really engages the family into services. I had one situation where the family was refusing to move to meet with CPS. CPS couldn't locate them. They wouldn't answer the phone. Nobody had had time to go out and see the parents. So our volunteer got a couple of Dr. Peppers and some Cheetos, went and knocked on their door and said, hey, I'm not CPS. Sat on their porch and visited with them, and they agreed to meet with CPS and go to court. So it's very powerful. It may be things like Johnny left it was a drug raid in the middle of the night, and Johnny left his favorite teddy bear and his glasses. Well, the Early Family Engagement volunteer can go and get those things. Okay? He can say to the family, hey, I saw your kids, they're safe, they're okay. You know, and I talk to them. Sometimes we only talk to them on the phone if there's a short turnaround. But I will say in the outer counties, the parents don't have attorneys as often. So that adversary hearing could be 3 or 4 weeks down the line, which I think is really unfair. But if they don't have attorneys arguing that there shouldn't be an extension, it happens. Okay, questions about early family engagement? It's a great, great program. We saw, I don't know what our statistics here are in our county yet because we haven't been doing it for quite a year, but they were in Travis County, they were closing cases at the 4-month mark, the 6-month mark, and kids were not only going home more frequently, they were going with relatives more frequently. So it's a really, really good way to engage families and get them on board, you know, and help families be more successful, and kids too. So I'm going to pass these out to these two you guys here. Oh, I got to keep one, sorry. No, you can't have it. So I'll wait till everybody gets this. This is the timeline of the case. So I'll wait till everybody gets their handouts.
What is TMC stand for?
I'm going to talk about temporary managing conservatorship. Isn't that wonderful? I might ask you to do it, Linda.
I'd be very interested.
I think you'd be great at it. Isn't that great?
It really is.
Yeah.
I just knew there were so many new things that were coming up.
Yeah, it is new. All right, everybody got their handouts? Everybody got, yes, sir, you need one? Okay, thanks. Thanks, Sarah. All right, so, oh look, I have a pointer. Woo-hoo! I love the pointer, I forgot it. TMC. TMC stands for Temporary Managing Conservatorship.